Hey everybody, welcome back to the Threecast. I'm your host, Matthew Weber. I'm joined by Vincent Hoy.
It's up.
How you doing, Vince?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. New Year's been just same old, same old. I can't believe it's already the end of January, man. So it's been a while. But
Yeah, it has, and time has gone really fast, and I think we've all been thoroughly disappointed in 2021 so far, but what are you gonna do?
well, I was gonna say there's some really good stuff today's topic, and just to catch up on the current day events, I think it's actually fairly poignant that we're talking about this particular movie today.
Yeah, this movie is definitely a very relevant in the last probably the last year or so, really.
I'd say the last 3 weeks. I'm just putting it out there. The last 3 weeks, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely all right, so this is a Threecast. We review things, usually movies, sometimes TV shows. Every once in a while, do a comic book. Uh, and this week it was my choice. I chose V for Vendetta. Now, this movie came out in like what,
What,
2000?
10 years ago or something like that?
We're gonna have to look because it's
I don't
been.
know. You could tell it was old because I honestly remember watching it with a little buddy of mine, and he's like graduate university. So yeah, it's a long time ago.
Yeah, 2006.
Okay, so it's been a long time, man. That's a
It's been a
long,
while.
long time.
Like the guy who
Wow.
put the John Hurt, he died a couple years ago. So
Yep. Yep.
Um, so it's been a minute. So if you've never watched this movie, first of all, you should go watch this movie. It's based on a graphic novel by. All right, Vince, who is it by?
Alan Moore. Alan Moore, the same guy that brought you 300, Sandman, and I think From Hell. Like those were some of the movie, sorry, the made to movie, but also the original graphic novels. So he's a fairly prolific guy. Did a lot of stuff for the DC sub universe, like the alternate universe and stuff, and very won a lot of awards actually. And the funny thing is about this, if I recall, he didn't want to have anything to do with it.
Oh, I didn't know that. Do you know the story behind that?
I think this is coming off of the heels of, like, you gotta remember, this is way back. See, this is why I remember it so old, because I remember when they first started talking about making, superhero movies was kind of still new. And I remember stuff like League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, because that was another one where it's like, I think it was Alan Moore property as well, where basically he's taking like, the Invisible Man and like the I don't know, Captain Nemo from all these different fictions, and he's putting them together to make a super team, right? So that was one thing, and he had that, and it was a big flop. Like Sean Connery, God rest his soul, he was in that as well, and it was like a flop. And then I think it was also coming off the heels of, I think it was Johnny Depp was the guy in the From Hell, like the Jack the Ripper movie. So these all were like kind of bomb-ish movies. Like they had good star power, but they just died. So like I think Alan Moore was a little bit, yeah, you guys are kind of like poison to my IP. So I think he
Kind of
kind
got
of
burnt
said,
by Hollywood.
yeah. And to be fair, I think because I remember reading these in the back. I remember Ricky and I are guys that read comics, like legit paper pulp comics. So I remember reading this, and this was pretty salacious, not salacious, but pretty provocative stuff from when I was a kid. And it was talking about like, you didn't really find all those many things about like, it's in some DC comics, to be fair, they did, but like, it's talking about sex, it was talking about suppression, sexuality, not just simply, at that point in time, Nazism and Judaism and like the Jewish, the stuff in the World War II Holocaust, that was a lot of like hype, like not hype, but a lot, it was done, trended a lot, like the Mouse comics and stuff. So what you see is that in this one, it was like, oh man, brown people or Muslims and stuff like that. And it's like, it was a different type of like prejudice, which back in the 80s, we really didn't have all that much of, right?
Well, at least not acknowledged, right? It wasn't in the
Yeah,
the
yeah,
the
exactly.
Hollywood sphere because that kind of stuff goes through. Like, I mean, you don't want to call it fads, but it's kind of like goes through its periods. They go away for they cover it for a while and then it goes away and stuff, and it's always something a little bit different. Anyway, so if
Hmm.
you haven't watched the movie itself is about a like a post uh, I don't know I don't want to call it like post-apocalyptic because it's not
Well, it
really
kind of is
post.
because there's a pandemic that kind of wipes out a lot of the world's population, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I guess that would be a good. I mean, we called it relevant because I mean, this pretty much has a lot of stuff that's going on today. It has the
Exactly.
virus, it has the
Uh,
political unrest, it has the
Fascism on the
yeah,
rise.
yeah the
The military kind of questioning whether or not it lets people in hordes of unwashed mobs come and invade and destroy federal buildings. I'm just saying,
yeah.
like there's a lot of stuff that's really poignant in this movie that is kind of relevant today.
Yeah, it's really quite crazy. So, I don't know that I mean the I guess the real summary of it is that there's a mass terrorist or whatever named V. I mean they call him a terrorist, right? And he's a victim of the current regime, but we don't really know that at the beginning. We just know that he's some guy who's set
Like a
on
vigilante, yeah.
yeah, and he's dressed as Guy Fawkes, right? It's the guy
Hmm.
who tried to blow up Parliament back in the what
I don't know.
1600s, something
Yeah,
like that.
1600s. It's like 400 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's quite a while. It was obviously quite a while ago. So he's taking up this persona, and he's very obviously well spoken, and we come up to find that he's been fighting his own little war against the regime in Britain for 20 years or something.
Yeah.
And he starts he comes out by blowing up the Old Bailey, which is like the main court building in
Hmm.
Britain, I think. I don't know anything about buildings in Britain, obviously, except for like the main one that he blows up at the end.
Hmm.
So uh, and then he spends like a whole year like getting people to follow his cause,
Hmm.
and everybody comes to Parliament at the end, and he blows it up after he kills the bad guy.
So I think there's a lot of stuff that happened in the middle there, but
Yeah,
yeah, like that's a general gist of it.
Vince, I'm horrible at summaries.
Well, I know, but I mean, there's so many things to be unpeeled that I mean, to give a summary is effectively going to be like a 10-minute thing, but
I
like
know.
there's a lot to be said about like the Orwellian kind of dystopian future that's portrayed there, and there's of course it's the one man versus the entire kind of system that is really a fascist regime. But the interesting thing is right off the beginning they start talking about like it's not a man, it's an idea, right? The
Mhm.
revolutionary idea. And that's the reason why the Guy Fawkes mask is such a poignant theme in the actual movie. Like you never see Hugo Weaving. Like basically the reason why he got this job was because of Mr. Anderson, like the whole Matrix stuff, right?
Mhm.
So the premise is that I think what's funny? We didn't in any point name Evie or Natalie Portman's character, which I think is the real protagonist of the movie, right? So despite the fact that we've been talking about V, who's been kind of the hero or the anti-hero of the movie, the real person that we follow through is, of course, this character named Evie, who basically is saved by V at the beginning. And over the course of the plot, we discover that she's on some level a pawn in the system where she's working for the broadcasting network, which is effectively a fascist media
Propagandist.
mouthpiece, right? Yeah. And basically what emerges is that she is kind of we follow her trajectory not only in understanding the kind of driving force behind V, and essentially the insinuation is that V was like a science experiment that was like made into Superman, but basically kind of went rogue and all that stuff. So, but in behind that, we know that this regime is very corrupt. It's caused like a boss bunch. It's essentially they insinuated that they also planted the false flag kind of things where they kind of killed their own population to kind of get the population to vote for them and give them power to just do all these right wing things. But then at the same time, we see like it's not just a perfect relationship. Like you think that that's a nice kind of like storybook, like rah 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 fight against the regime. Quite the contrary. We actually see that there's kind of there's this potential to be complacent about it. And we see that Evie then mysteriously in one of the raids with one of her homosexual employer, she basically they beat down the homosexual employer, and of course she gets kind of we understand it to be that she gets abducted in prison, and then basically they're asking, hey, can you tell us where V is or tell us who he is? And she refuses to concede, and eventually her hair gets cut. She kind of reads like the kind of testimonials of past kind of people imprisoned. It turns out that V was the actual one that imprisoned her, and it was just to basically say like, look, man, there's a tipping point, and you kind of broke through, and at that point, she's I don't want to say indoctrinated, but she's drinking the Kool-Aid. And we're cool with this because then the movie just really goes on a steamroll, and it just says, okay, everyone just bought into it. And there's this convoluted plot about sending a train to the House of Parliament. I didn't even know that the train could actually go towards, like, did you know that this is possible? I'm an architecture prof, and I was like, wait, they could route the train.
Parliament's like right next to a river. I'm not quite sure how there's an underground train, but it's possible because I mean there's subways, but
yeah, but I mean that's like, I mean, I think in general, maybe that is the case, but I mean North America, we traditionally don't put subway stations perfectly under like big civic buildings like that. That's strange. In any event, especially the where the actual subway proper is. I mean, you can
usually they follow the roads, right? I mean,
yeah, exactly. So they're under the public thoroughfares, but they're not really like directly under the building, which is the kind of implication, because then the fireworks and the the pyrotechnics at the end. Obviously, V kind of defends, and it's like a big solo action fight towards the end. He dies, a noble death. And it's not until the investigator, again, a sub character who's been kind of, again, the kind of witness to see what's going on and unraveling the kind of machinations of this regime, he eventually confronts Eve and says, hey, look, I'm a detective and I'm going to bust you. And she basically says, no, not really. And he lets her send the train with the explosives and the body of V to the House of Parliament. Explodes. And at the same time, the House of Parliament's been protected by the military. But then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, the military just basically says, stand down, and all of this horde of this mob essentially just kinds of descends into the actual House of Parliament. So
all like standing right next to the building that's about to blow up.
Yeah, which never really makes sense, because at the end you just see they're watching the building blow up and the pyros, and of course, yes, they have a nice warming scene where all the people that got killed or were killed under the regime, you see them reveal their masks, because again, the message is that V is not a person, V is an idea, right? And that's why it ends on that note. But I was thinking, there are a lot of people running towards a blown up building, so it just didn't quite. I get the symbolism and stuff, but it's just kind of strange. So can we talk about just the immediate thing, which is, when this movie came out, I'm not sure if you did you watch this in the theaters, man? You were probably too young for this.
Well, no, but I probably saw it not too long after. I probably watched it the first time probably around 2008, I'd say.
Okay. So the thing about this movie is that it was making a big deal because of a couple of things. I remember in America there was a lot of heated discussion about just terrorism, right? I mean, we're still hot off the believe it or not, several years still after September 11th, but you remember America went to war and basically started mistreating a lot of prisoners, and the kind of what is the line, right, that you use to treat prisoners of war, or how do you get stuff if you knew that there was a terrorist that knew the next destination for a plot for destruction, what length will you go to kind of get that information, right? So
it wasn't even all that. It was, I mean, it wasn't only that. It was also how much freedom were you willing to give up in order to have safety, right?
Yeah, and what you see here is V, despite being the kind of anti-hero who protects and everything, he there are points in the movie where it's funny because he's very honest. He'll be he says I think there were points where in the movie it was are you going to kill any more people? And he's like, yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's just the nature of he's you know very well that whether or not he's deranged, I think it's clear that he is deranged, but the fact of the matter is that it's a very good proxy of the discussions that were being had in America, I would say the world, I'd say, on what is the kind of level of torture, what is the kind of willingness to kind of sell your freedom to get that safety. Because we see in this movie that it's very clear that the fascist regime is something that you should rally against, right? The whole point of V fighting for this stuff is so that people can have their freedom. People don't have to worry about being homosexual or of a certain skin color or whatever, right? But the way it's portrayed, and in the light of today, though, right? You can't help but deny the fact that we talk about liberator or terrorist, right? What's the difference really? It depends on the perspective, right? So in this case, when you saw, I'm not sure when you watched this last. I watched it a few days ago. But when we're talking about the kind of mob attacking the kind of parliament, I mean, you and I both know that it's a little bit closer to the politics of what's happening now, right? So I was just wondering what your perspective was, because I mean, I got a couple of things to say about what's going on now and what's going on in that movie. It's unfortunate to say that, like, 15, 16 years later, I mean, nothing's really changed. But what's your call on this, man?
Well, I probably watched this movie maybe 10, 12 times. I mean, I've watched it quite a lot over the years. It's just one of those movies where every once in a while you want to watch a comic book movie that's not, I mean, this movie really doesn't go all comic book there until the end, right?
There's no colors, man. There's no color in this entire
right, and there's no I mean, the explosions or whatever are all Michael Bay, but the fight scenes, at least at the beginning, are just regular old like fight scenes. It's not until you get to the end where you have the crazy slow motion and stuff, and it gets a little comic booky. But there's just so many different threads in this movie that kind of have shown up not only throughout history, but I mean very recent, like the idea of protesting and also people just sitting by and I mean one of the big things you get in this movie is that apparently nobody in this movie has a job. I mean they're all sitting at home or watching in a bar TV. Or something watching TV all the time. That's where you see everybody, and they all seem very complacent about what's going on, right? I think the reason why is because the skew is that the main, like, Evie is working for media. The whole premise of like the media arm of that party basically planted the false flag, and they were the echelon that moved up. So, and then to also make sure that the general public was aware of this kind of artifice, that I think the whole thing had to pertain to media, right? Well, the way I took it was that the only people you actually see doing stuff are the people who are part of the regime or whatever. Everybody else is just kind of
they don't do so much. They just sit in that black room and they're just like complaining. It's like, if you do this, I'll fire you, like that kind of thing. It's like I just thought that was very like, what do you do? Like, they just meet every day. It's like Zoom meetings. Like this. So many things are going on today where I'm like, that's a Zoom meeting. There's a point when I can imagine being that big face of that dictator despot going, guys, we got to do this, or someone's going to get failed in this course or something. Like, it's just kind of funny because it's like, yeah, that's just like Zoom. Like, and it's like, oh yeah, that invasion of Parliament, that's just like what happened 3 weeks ago on the Capitol. Like, there's so many things that are just like, my God, this is like too close.
I mean, you have the virus. You have the experimentation on humans and stuff like that. I mean, that stuff has been going on since the CIA was basically invented in the 40s.
Using a method of commuting to basically serve as a human mobilized weaponized bomb, right? Like, to destroy buildings, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's just so many things. I mean, just so many little things like that. And that's before you get into the whole, the homosexual stuff, the Muslims and everybody getting put in black bags, and so the torture and stuff. I mean, there's just so many threads in this movie that kind of not have exact corollaries in the real world, but definitely things that are
teasing hints.
Yeah, I mean, definitely things that are much closer than what we'd probably really want them to be. So, but and we could talk more about that, but I just want to say this before I forget. John Hurt is amazing in this movie. I mean, all we see really is a video of him, right? I mean, like he's the big screen villain, the High Chandler, but he does just such a good job of shouting at people. He just I mean, there's some fairly poor acting in this too. The detective or whatever.
I don't know. I think Natalie Portman does not keep her accent all the way through, and she also, like, there are points when you're just like she'll just be, I don't want to do that, or like something like that. And
and she's not. Did
you say
she's
that?
Not a very good crier either. A fake crier. Some of the crying came off as very over the top. But John Hurt was amazing. Hugo Weaving's voice was amazing.
Well,
I mean, I don't.
Yeah, and like, let's be honest here. It's not like, what the funny thing is, because you can tell that the whole thing had to have been dubbed, because if he was really behind a mask, we all, again, wearing a mask. If you knew that he was talking behind a mask, you'd be like, what? He said again, right? Because there's a point in the beginning when he starts, just doing that kind of every single word is a V word, like that kind of alliteration. It's like, the vivaciousness of the
that was definitely done in a studio. Definitely.
Yeah, but then the thing is, it's so clear that the quality of some of the acting was really good. And like, I'll be honest with you, like, even when again, I don't want to give him too much credit, but like the fact is that he's wearing a mask, and there are instances where you can tell he's angry, instances where you can tell he's actually affectionate, and it's still behind the mask. Like remember when they're watching the Count of Monte Cristo on the couch, and you see you could just like he tilts his head when he's like watching the ending, and she tilts. Like it's just I thought those little subtle things were like again little nuanced things of acting that I don't think people give credit to.
It was very well done. And it's not the type of I think we can be honest about this, Vince. We don't see this type of good acting very often in movies that are action movies. You know,
Mhm.
I mean, usually a lot of the times when you see very well done emotional, acting, it's in movies that are meant to be, emotional and
Fest or something, yeah.
yeah. I mean, this at its heart is supposed to be an action movie. I mean,
Yeah.
there are explosions and there's fight scenes and stuff. I mean, it has all this other stuff too. I mean, it has the token romance between Evie and V, and it has
Mhm.
all this other stuff. But I mean, it's an action movie. But in most action movies, especially these days, I mean, it's an action movie. You're not
Mhm.
expecting over the top. I mean, most of the time, it's Fast and Furious stuff. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Well, I still stand by our way, way, way earlier discussion, I don't know, about a decade ago, where it's like, are there any good actors? Like, I mean, like let's be honest here. We always talk to us like, so I think we talked to us like, yeah, before the whole sex standard scandal and stuff. I know we talked about like, yeah, Kevin Spacey's not a bad actor, and then we were like, Denzel Washington, very good actor, right? And then it was like, okay, fine, we got some good actors. Can we name any good actresses? And it was like all of us were like, oh,
Meryl Streep, maybe?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
maybe?
Yeah, like that's about it, man. So, yeah, but just coming back to this movie though,
That was a
I,
long time ago.
well, I do want to say that the movie is dark, and I'm not sure if the film that they used was just kind of low budget. It's weird because this came after, like, I remember it was 2001 is when the Matrix movie, or 1998 is when the movie, yeah, I think 1998 or 1999 was when Matrix came out, right? And I remember the crispness and just like, sure, the visual stunning stuff was good, but like this is made by the same dudes. Sorry, it's made by the Wachowskis, right? So
Hmm.
I just thought it was kind of strange where it's like, did they just make this in the 80s and then dust it off? Because like there's points in the movie, and maybe it's because it's like the British thing, but it looked like the 1980s, and I just couldn't like. I was like, what makes it the 80s? Because like they got fluorescent lights, they got white, like I mean everything is like kind of timeless, right?
Well,
But it's not.
I think the reason why they shot it like that was because they were trying to give the impression that technological advancement hadn't really sped up because of all the things that went on in the world. So I mean, like you see like really fairly old monitors and stuff on the for the computers and stuff, but and you also see like uh, yeah, you like the flickering lights and where they go like to the tax center or whatever
Yeah,
to
yeah,
find
yeah.
the tax records. It's very fluorescent, lighting. I think that they did that on purpose to kind of show that because of everything that I mean maybe I'm reading too much into it, but they were the technological advancement didn't keep going because the rest of the world went to hell. I mean
Hmm.
apparently in the United States is at civil war and there is the Prothero guy calls it a leper colony, which is
Hmm.
whatever. And I think it's I don't know if it's ever said, but it's kind of insinuated that it's because the virus spread outside of Britain. That's the reason why because
Yep.
they're still technically in quarantine in like London or whatever.
Yeah.
Like the whole city's in quarantine. You can't not supposed to leave it.
Yeah, yeah, and I think again, it's just kind of funny scenarios that are eerily similar, where it's like, okay, there's a false flag situation where where did this virus come from, right? Like, I mean, if you talk to the current media about the coronavirus, it's like it came from China, but then there's like, oh no, it could have come from somewhere else, or it could have been made in a kind of weapons factory or something like
Well, I mean,
some strange stuff, right?
right, both sides. I mean, something like Trump obviously notoriously called it the China virus, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And now that we have all these new strains or whatever, I mean, now we have the South African variant and the
Hmm.
UK variant.
Yep.
Like we're always put. It's the way of saying, well, you want to know what? It came from over there. We can blame those people.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah, yeah. But the movie, I think this movie though was really kind of poignant, and I just wanted to say that, as you were saying, it is unlike a lot of other movies, superhero movies. I mean, the only other one that I can think of that's kind of got this grit to it isn't even like the Batman stuff, because even the Batman stuff, like I mean, Batman still kind of comes out on top, right? I was thinking of the Watchmen movie, which again, another Alan Moore property, right? A bleak kind of perspective on the superhero genre, and it had more adult content, like and I just think that what's really good about Alan Moore. Now, of course, I haven't watched The Boys. Like I know everyone talks about that Netflix or the Amazon series. I can't remember. I haven't had a chance to watch it, but they were talking about how that's kind of like, if superheroes were bad. In this case, I just feel that this is more of like in the world where things are bad. What do superheroes really do? What would they really be believing? Like the whole Boy Scout of Superman kind of model is not going to work. And in this case, in a kind of fascist regime, you're not going to have a Superman that's going to help things. I mean, you're going to resort to a Batman, and even at a Batman level, he does have the line of "I don't kill," whereas this V is clearly a deranged serial killer, but he just happens to be doing it. Like the other thing about this was, do you really believe that V is a good person at heart?
Well, no, I don't think. I mean, they even said in the movie, there's a line that says, he says, what they did to me was monstrous, and Evie says, and they created a monster. It's a very good line. So I mean, I think
Yeah.
it's very much like that. He lost everything. So I mean, they even took, like, he didn't even know who, like, he was tortured so much they didn't even know who he didn't even know who he
Really, yeah.
was. Like, he doesn't know his real name or anything. So he's
But that's
definitely
the thing.
lost.
So I have some questions about this because, see, on watching this again, I was just like, okay, so this is all about a very selfish individual who takes power into his own hands and unmasks it as a kind of movement. But at the end of the day, look at it. He really is just kind of fetishizing the torture of someone to get them to love, or eventually to kind of help, what do you want to call it, like kind of Stockholm syndrome or whatever. But like basically, she falls in love with him because he tortures her, which is kind of weird. And then like the whole premise of the movie is that he's just trying to get back at the regime that made him who he is, right? It's not like, I mean, it is under the voice that, oh yeah, I'm looking out for society, and society's under under weak governance and all stuff. But let's be honest here. If it were really about this guy that was benevolent and trying to help out, they wouldn't call the movie V for Vendetta, right? Because it's just about this individual's kind of desire for vengeance, and it's not so subtly referred to when, of course, they're watching The Count of Monte Cristo,
Monte
which
Cristo,
is
yeah.
totally just about revenge, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I kept on thinking, like, everyone watches this movie and says, yeah, the guy's a good guy, even though he's kind of crazy, and yeah, you got to break a couple of eggs to make an omelet kind of thing where he kills people. But the reality is that this guy's a complete psychopath who doesn't really care about people. And he just uses people and death to, though the message is kind of loud and clear, he's really just trying to get revenge,
Well,
right?
he's trying to get revenge, and I think I don't know if I would go psychopath more, that he wanted Evie to be like him, right? He wanted her,
Mm-hmm.
because she's really, because she obviously suffered a lot in this movie before
Mm-hmm.
he went through and tortured her. I mean, she lost her
Parents. Yep.
parents and her
Yep.
brother and all this stuff because of the regime. But
Mm-hmm.
she's like she's a victim who didn't become bitter. She was actually working for the regime, really. So I
Yep.
mean,
Yep.
she didn't go through. She wasn't a protester. She wasn't creating any problems. She was just a regular citizen like everybody else that seemed to be just going along with it. And then V comes along, and I think he sees this and says, that could have been me, but I became bitter and vengeful and stuff like that. So he instead of reforming to be a better person, he decided, well, I'm going to make her more like me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, I can see that. And I mean, just to kind of flesh it out again with not so fine a point. The fact is, you remember that when after they watched the Count of Monte Cristo, do you remember what Evie says? She actually turns to, like, he's like, "Oh, what do you like about the movie?" And she says, "I feel sorry for Mercedes because I want to paraphrase here, but she says, I feel sorry for Mercedes because it seemed like the Count, like the Count of Monte Cristo, was more focused on revenge than her, right? Than loving
yeah,
her. We loved revenge more than we loved her, right? Or something to that effect, right?" And I thought that was really like so on the nose, because even though it was like a kind of date night kind of scenario that was happening in front of us, the bottom line is that it just reinforced to me that this guy is not a good guy, despite everything that might be presented, that he's like saving her, that he's kind of fighting the bad regime. just because you're fighting the bad regime doesn't make you a good guy, right? Like Stalin fought Hitler. I mean, that doesn't make Stalin's regime good, right?
Right. And when Stalin killed actually more people, right? I mean, so.
Yeah. Yeah. So like that's the thing that I think sometimes people didn't quite pick up on in this particular movie. Because to me, I was like, I'm watching a real tragic condition emerge at the end of the movie. Like you're just like, so the guy that we thought might have been the protagonist, he's dead. Evie, we don't really have an idea because Ishir, isn't she kind of damaged because of him? The governance and the order that would have kind of been there to at least an authority to kind of allow for society to continue no longer really exists. The mob has kind of taken over. What at the end of the day has actually happened? We've kind of taken 2 steps back, so it's now mob rule. Like that's the reason why the ending was just like, oh, I don't know, man. Like people are like all happy to see stuff blow up, but it's like, look at tomorrow. That's not going to be cool, man.
Yeah, it is definitely one of those endings that you definitely like. It's a head scratcher because you're not sure. I mean, I personally think that the ending is probably the worst part of the movie, for multiple reasons. From a cinematic story kind of perspective, the fight scene between V and Creedy's henchmen and all that stuff is just it doesn't fit with the rest of the movie. Because the rest of the movie is the fight scenes just are regular fight scenes, and the blowing up the stuff that's Michael Bay stuff, but all of a sudden we get to this part and we're in slow motion and we have special effects around the knives and stuff, but that's beside the point. But you make a good point. Is that there's no, I mean, what the ending that is portrayed is supposed to be this resolution of, yay, we blew up the building, we're all here, we're all united against now. I mean, before we were united against whatever the Chancellor said we were united against, which is the rest of the world, and now we're united against the Chancellor, who is now dead, and it doesn't really give a sense of what's next. And because I mean, just because you've gotten rid of the bad leaders doesn't mean you don't need leaders themselves, right? So
yeah, like I mean, I look at like what happened after. I know it sounds terrible. It's like between you and I, just like kind of armchair history buffs, but like I mean, look when Hitler's like the Third Reich collapsed, right? Like it's you had a whole bunch of people who, for love or hate it, like they really did subscribe to the Nazi regime, right? And then if you just left the regime, if you left the regime or the remnants of whatever the population was uncontrolled, you'd have chaos. So the fact that the Americans and the Russians kind of took Berlin into 2 pieces really does speak to the 2 different ways. Like they needed to have some sort of power vacuum addressed, right? But at the same time, like as much as we might hate the kind of red iron curtain coming down, I can't imagine like the absolute anarchy that would have emerged had there been no kind of authority and control.
Yeah. So Vince, final thoughts on this movie. What did you think? Overall, what did you think?
Oh, I mean, honestly, it's a solid 7 out of 10 for me. I mean, there's some dated stuff. There's some acting hiccups here and there for me. The thing was with the movie soundtrack, I'm really surprised that there was nothing really memorable. Like, I mean, certainly the 1812 overtures are always a hit.
It's very blah to me. It was not. Yeah. It's not.
Which is a surprise too, because at that point in time, like the 2000s were a really good peak. Like, I mean, the 90s to the 2010s, that was like from like the John Williams heyday. Like you got everything from like the Jurassic Park series stuff to like the Hans Zimmer, the Lord of the Rings, all the Lord of the Rings tracks, like all these soundtracks were burgeoning and coming out, and then like this movie just had like its reliance on Tchaikovsky, which was okay. But in any event, solid movie. It does have some themes that just unfortunately are recapitulated now. So maybe that commentary is going to be just as good 50 years from now.
Yeah, I think it's one of those movies that's going to kind of hold it's going to age perfectly fine. I mean, it's the technology or whatever will be a little bit weird, but I think it's one of those. I mean, and honestly, it's kind of a lot like Count of Monte Cristo, because I mean, I don't know if you know this, Vince, but Count of Monte Cristo has been redone in so many different. I mean, the basic structure of that story has been redone so many times. I mean, over and over again. Guy gets.
He gets scorned and he gets imprisoned unjustly. Yep. Someone clearly betrayed him on the outside. On the inside, he gets some sort of mentor or help. He builds himself up, and then under a separate identity, a masked identity, dare I say, he kind of enacts revengeance, right?
Yeah, it's basically it's over and over again. They've redone this. I mean, I think and really, V for Vendetta is just a redone story plot line of that. The guy gets in prison, comes back, and the only thing that this really didn't have was the betrayal aspect, because we don't really know anything about the main character.
Well,
We don't know,
I
he
mean,
doesn't know.
okay, so I just want to put up my cookies or my conspiracy theory hat on this one. I would argue that though we don't really get anything explicitly exposed about V, I would say that his past life, he must have been a thespian of some sort, because if he weren't an actor, he wouldn't be practicing the fencing moves. He wouldn't be such a movie cinephile for the Count of Monte Cristo. I mean, you could have read the book. Instead, he's watching the movies. The fact that he can recite things with such absolute clarity. It's clear that he's scripted something, or that he's able to recite those lines. So I'm going to be of the opinion that he used to be an actor, physically fit, right? And then he got used to make those experiments, and that's why he is what he is. So that's my little backstory on V.
I could definitely see that, because he's also a very meticulous planner, right? So I mean, he somehow manages to take hundreds of thousands of masks and send them via the postal service. I mean,
okay, so he's a good drop shipper. Okay, so
I mean, he has this, obviously has a plan, right? But he also apparently subscribes to stamps.com or something. I don't know. Sorry. So I would give this probably a 4 out of 5. It's very, very good. It probably could tip it over to 5 out of 5 if the soundtrack had been better.
Yeah, that's a tough
one of those
one.
things that, yeah, I always watch the movie first and pay attention to the plot and stuff like that, and then I always go back through and think about what do I remember about the sound behind it, you know. And this one, the only thing, you're right, Vince, the only thing you remember is the A-Train 12 overture, and
it's just right that's like the first 5 minutes of the movie, and then it's just downhill because it's the ambient stuff, right?
Yeah, there's I mean, not every composer can be John Williams. You know, not everyone can be Hans Zimmer, but I mean, there were so many.
But look, that is the thing is, at that era, Hans Zimmer was still hitting his stride. We got the Goldsmith, the all the kind of big name.
Yeah, there's
composers,
so
Horner,
many.
all those guys, right?
Silvestri, Danny Boyle, is that his name? The guy who did.
He's the guy that does the Olympic Games.
yeah. Well, I mean, he did a couple movies too.
Mm-hmm.
The guy who did I think he did one of the Harry Potters as well. I mean, there's just so many of them that, I mean, even the ones that aren't top tier John Williams kind of guys. Mm-hmm. Chances are they may have not been able to afford John Williams, but they could have found somebody other than this guy's name was Danny DiBlario or.
Oh man, that poor guy, man. But that was the peak heyday of soundtracks, right? I mean, let's be honest here. Right nowadays, we're getting all these
every movie that came out in the 2000s, even the ones that were terrible, had good soundtracks, right? So all right. So that is it for us this time. Coming up next, so the way the schedule is going to be a little weird. So Ricky is still going to be part of the podcast. We're just kind of splitting things up to get around some weird scheduling stuff. So the next time will be Ricky and I, and Vince will join us if he can. Mm-hmm. We're going to be doing Frozen 2 and Cars 2 or something.
I remember Cars. Are we doing Frozen 2, man? Come on. Okay,
I'm desperately hoping that was a typo or something, because I don't want to watch it.
Come on, Ricky. Worse. I'd rather watch Frozen 2 again, man. Cars 2, Cars 2 is no, man. Can we do Frozen 2?
We know that sequels, Disney. There are no good Disney sequels. I mean, there's no good
Pixar. No, the Toy Story ones. I mean, every time they close it, even after Toy Story 2, I was like, okay, that's a good ending. And it's nope, they keep on coming with new ones. I'm not gonna spoil it, but the last Toy Story movie, I'm wondering, they can't do another sequel. They really can't do a sequel. But I keep on hearing rumors about it. So
you never know. They made 5 Pirates of the Caribbean, Vince.
Okay, but that doesn't really count, because that's just one big movie dragged out that making money, man.
All right, so they made a second National Treasure, Vince. I mean, you point out that Toy Story, it does a pretty good job of the sequels. I point out every other Disney movie that's ever had a sequel, because they're all bad. The second Lion King is bad. The second Aladdin is bad. I mean, you can't have Aladdin without Robin Williams, and they did it. They brought it Homer Simpson. Just over Ricky. Choose a different movie. I'm just trying to say. All right. Anyways, that is it for us this time. You can contact us via email at the3castshow@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at the3cast. I'm at MTWB. Vince is VWHUI. Ricky, who's not here, is Ricky_Williams1. You can also follow us on. You can subscribe to all of our stuff that you need to subscribe to at the3cast.com. So we'll be back either next week or the week after with whatever Ricky chooses to do, and we'll see you then.
Take care.